Hey again, this is Lok. Thanks for tuning in. I'm just going to give you a quick update on my reloading press. If you've seen my previous video where I showed off my Dillon 550 reloader and how I go through the whole process of cleaning the brass, picking out the primers and start reloading all my 38 Super Comp ammunition, and then clean it and then box it up. So that was then. So it's a few months since then, and I've moved on to reloading 9 major. Actually, I got my top end of my race gun converted to 9mm instead of 38 Super. I think one of the biggest points of moving on to 9 major is I don't have to worry about picking up brass anymore from the ground, because that's really boring, because half the time I'm shooting, half the time I'm running people, running shooters through the course, and then I'm looking down the ground. I spend most of my time just staring on the floor looking for my brass, and that's pretty distracting. It takes away the concentration, it takes away concentration as a range officer, more importantly, running shooters. And as a shooter, I will lose concentration. I don't have the focus in order to perform well in the match. So I decided to move to 9 major so I can leave my brass on the ground, because 9mm brass is so much cheaper to buy. I think you can get bulk 9mm brass for like 3 cents each, versus 38 Supercom like 15 cents per shell. Even if you use it 4 or 5 times, it would probably be about the same price. But then I have to look on the ground and pick up the brass, and I only pick up like 50% of the brass every time I go shoot anyway. So just some updates. I've converted, as you can see, to a 650XL. Got a good deal from a local shooter. Great deal. I've managed to replace the whole entire press, the 550 press, including the strong mount, and also the 3 different calibers that I reload for anyway. And for almost like double the price, but it's worth it. Let me tell you why it's worth it. So as with everything, as with reloading, always wear gloves when you're handling ammunition, powder, brass, lead, anything like that, because you don't want to end up having lead poisoning. And glasses, safety glasses are very important. Primers have known to go off sometimes if you're trying to crush one into a wrong brass that you forgot to sort properly. It might blow up and stuff like that. So give you a tour of my 650 press. Okay, here we go. So first thing is the 650 press came with a strong mount, the usual stuff that you see in Dillon reloaders. But what's really different is, obviously the biggest difference you see is this case feeder. What it does is once you clean and lube all your brass, you toss it above here. Let me show you what it looks like in there. So it's all brass sitting in there, and it has this interesting looking plate that has the size of a brass right in here. And what happens is it rotates, it picks up the brass, it makes sure it's oriented downwards, and then it drops it down into this tube, and it comes down and it gives you a stack of brass ready to go. And in the first station here, if you can look at here, what happens is it will pick up the brass. Let me go over to this side. Can you see it from here? Let me just zoom in. So you can see all the brass is stacked up and it's ready to go. It drops into the first station of the reloader, and that's when it sizes and deprimes the brass. So how it works is it has a sensor here, electrical sensor with a switch. And if the brass is full up to this point, it will press onto this switch and you'll stop the motors from running. As you can see, it's on right now, so nothing is moving at all. So if I start reloading the next round, what happens is the whole stack will drop, and this brass will drop, and the switch will turn on, and then it will start turning the motors, picking up brass and dropping it into here. Okay, so I'm just gonna drop one brass on purpose, and you can see how it turns in the top here. It turns, as you can see, it picks out all the brass, it orients them at the side here. As you can see, there's one ready to go. So if it starts to move and it comes over to this hole here, it will drop it into the funnel. Right, so that's the biggest difference between the 650 and 550. Well, you can buy a case feeder now for 550, but The other more obvious difference is it has an auto index. Let me move this back away. So instead of the 550 where every time I put a shell, I put a bullet, I pull the handle down to reload one round, I have to manually index the shell plate. But in the 650 I don't, because it's automatic indexing. Alright, so now I'm just going to load one round here, push it all the way to the top. Now what you see here is at the bottom of the shell plate there is a auto index mechanism that when you seat that round, and then when you bring the handle up again, it will rotate this a little bit when this part of the plastic engages. I don't know what you call that part, but let me just move down here and you can see it real clearly. When this part engages this plastic piece, it will automatically turn the shell plate, and that basically loads one round. So then it saves you the time from having to index, load a shell, load a bullet, and pull the handle again. In the 550, I had to do this multiple times, right? I have to put a shell manually from this side, put a bullet on the case that's ready to go, pull the handle down, seat the primer, and then index. So that's multiple steps. For a 650, all I have to do is just put a bullet as it's going up. Okay, pull the handle once. Oh, where did my case go? Here we go. Okay, pull the handle once, bring it down, and automatically index. All I have to do now is just look in and make sure there's powder in there. Load the next round, and then pull. So that's all I have to do. And you can see that the speed is so much quicker than a 550. I don't even have to take my hands off the roller handle anymore to do this, so it's much more quicker. There you go, like that. So, so if you ask me if the cost is worth whether the press is worth the cost, I say yes, definitely, because I thought I would get a marginal increase of speed, but now it's actually much faster. Not only just loading much faster, but much more simpler. You don't have to have so many moving components, so many manual steps in the process. Although you can say that if I can put in another device called a bullet feeder, which makes loading the bullet automatic. Then I don't need to, I can skip that step. So all I have to do is just keep cranking the handle one by one, and then I'll just produce rounds non-stop. I could do that too, but the bullet feeder is about $500. I don't think that's worth it at all. But there are some issues with the 650 that I don't really like. Number one, let me just bring the camera and show you. Oh, let me talk about it first. Okay, if you look at the 550's primer system, what's really good about the primer system is all the primers are coming out of the primer tube, and they're stacked up, and there's a loader that picks up one round from that stack of primers and brings it out into the shell plate for it to be forced into the brass. Now if the brass already has a primer, that primer is still going to stay there. It'll come back, it's not going to pick up any round because that bowl that holds the primer still has a primer. So it keeps going until that primer is used. When it comes back empty, another primer will drop. I like that system because you don't waste any primers. Now if you look at the 650, the 650 has a primer plate and has multiple holes on that plate that picks up. So we'll have a primer tube coming down here. As the primer plate turns, it picks up one primer, turns, picks up another primer, turns, picks up another primer. So every time you pull the handle, it picks up a primer. The problem with that is, it doesn't matter whether you use the primer or not, that primer plate is going to turn. So if you have a round that's already pre-primed, or if you skip a round or skip something on the shell plate because maybe the powder spilled and something, you take the brass out, so there's an empty slot, that primer is not going to be used, it's going to be kicked out. So it's going to keep turning until it hits the end, and you will drop down this primer chute. So the more mistakes you made, the more primer is going to end up in this chute, and it's going to, if you don't look at it properly, it's going to overflow, it's going to drop everywhere, and it's frustrating. So whether you use or do not use the primer, that primer that primer plate still turns. I prefer the 550 method because sometimes if you make any mistake, the primer is still there. You're not going to kick primers out. And so I keep having to take the primers out and then putting it into the primer tube and feeding it back to the primer assembly again, all over again. So that's the only nagging problem that I have. The way I fixed it is, when I was using the 550, what happens is when I finish my reloading, I'll just reload whatever rounds there's left on the shell plate and then empty the shell plate. Okay, so that's basically clean, fresh start. With the 650, if I do that, it takes 3 rounds for it to start holding on to the primers. And what will happen is you'll find out that if you do that kind of process where you empty the shell plate and start again, you always have 3 primers kicked out every time you start a reloading session. So in order to stop doing that, I just leave my rounds there. If you look at my shell plate, this is how I leave it. I leave it fully loaded with all the shells in place. So the next time I want to come and reload some rounds, I just come over here and start producing rounds. And once I'm done, I just leave it like that. I don't even bother cleaning it. I just leave all the shells, I leave all the powder exposed. Fine. I mean, nothing's going to happen. Nobody's going to come here and play with my reloading equipment anyway, so I'll do that. So that's what I do. And it makes the process much more simpler. I can just, if I'm bored, I've done watching all my YouTube videos, done all my work, I'll just come over and load maybe 50, 100 rounds. Just come in here, just start cranking the rounds out, and then when I'm done, I'll just take the rounds, chamber check, and then toss it in a tumbler and polish it, and then box it up, just as how I do it in the past anyway. So that's what I do. A lot more convenient, saves me more time. The only issue here is finding good 9mm brass. There are some military crimped brass available that you've got to be careful about, because primers can't go in there. You might be forced in, you might crush the primers. If you're unlucky, you might even blow that primer up and go poof, so it's a loud sound. So what I do now is I load 9 major. I still use the same components. I use, although I use various 9mm brass now, I'm still using the same 124 grain Montana Gold CMJs. I think these are by far the best 9mm rounds that exist today. The reason why is, they have a very long ogive, long flat space before it hits the ogive, which is where the bullet starts to curve into the tip. The longer you have, the longer space you have, the more area it has to engage the rifling in your barrel, and thus making it spin more, making it more accurate. That's the theory. Well, it has been proven practically, because a lot of folks say that the jacketed hollow point of JHP rounds is accurate because it has a really long flat surface before the ogive, before it starts to taper in. The CMJ is a great round. It's a fully jacketed round, and it's covered at the back by a plate to stop the to make it less smoky, if you like. So it's a complete metal jacket round. I still reload that. For powder, I'm using the fabulous Hodgdon HS6 round powder. These are great for 9 major. This is also good for 38 Supercom, I believe. And in 38 Super, I was using the Vita Vuri N105, but now I'm using Hodgdon HS6. I load 7.8 grains for every round of 9 major. I think that put me about 171, 172 power factor. I haven't chronoed it yet. I chronoed 8 grains. I chronoed 8.2 grains, and they were like 179 power factor. So I dropped it to 7.8. Now a lot of folks in the community use 8 grains, 8.3 grains. Some use 8.7 grains of HS6 just to meet the major power factor. And the reason is it all depends on how many holes you have at the end of the compensator. The more holes you have, the more gas comes off and leaks, basically slows the bullet down. And also the barrel. My new 9 major barrel is brand new. It's really tight, so the bullet goes much faster that way. That's it. Everything else is exactly the same. I have the same kind of dies. I had some problem initially when I was using the standard 9mm sizer and deprimer die. It didn't size the brass properly. It's because the 9mm brass is well known for being, I can't reach in to get more brass, but it's well known to have a bulge, especially if you don't buy pre-processed brass. you find that some of this brass, if not sized correctly, has a bulge at the end here, famously called the Glock bulge, right? So then what you need to do is you either process the brass, or for like me, I chose to use the U die, or the undersized die that you can buy from EGW. So if you go to EGW, I'll put the URL down here. You can buy the undersized die, which is a hair smaller than your traditional sizing die. That makes it much smaller than is required. And then when you go through the press, although it's a little bit harder, a little bit tough, I use case loop to make the process much smoother. But what happens is the rounds that come out are very consistent. They are small and they will fit into my case gauge properly. So that's it. That's an update to my reloading process and reloading press. If you are looking to buy a new press, I would highly suggest the 650. I remember when I started reloading, I was thinking whether I should go with 550 or 650, and a few folks in the community told me that if you want to learn how to reload and customize a lot of rounds, go with 550 because it's a manual press and it gives you full control, especially the indexing plate issue. If you had to start playing with the kind of powder or the size of the seating depth or the size of the case bedding mouth and all kinds of different things that you want to be in full control of, the 650 is difficult because once it starts to index, it's hard to bring it back again. You have to take the brass out and pull it back. Whereas 550, you can manually return the index and continue from that perspective. So 550 is a lot more manual. If you want to play with all kinds of calibers, different powder, different power factors, and different bullets and so on, so 550 is great. 650 is what I would recommend because you could learn how to play with rounds using 650. You can. It just takes a little bit more time, but it's a great investment. I remember after 1 year of loading my 550, I regretted I should have bought a 650 because then I can start producing rounds much quicker. And it has a host of options, host of things that you could add on to it, like the case feeder, the bullet feeder, and all kinds of accessories. Although it's a little bit more pricey, it's in the same concept as buying a gun safe. Always buy more than you need because eventually you will regret that you didn't buy a much bigger safe because your gun collection will always increase. So same principle, just somebody once told me buy once, cry once, right? So you don't have to cry multiple times like I did. So go with a 650. If you can afford it, go with a 1050 straight away. If you can, that's a lot more pricey. But it does all kinds of amazing. If you want to load rifle rounds, you want to do case preparation for those rifle rounds, like swaging the primer pockets and so forth, you can do that on a 1050. You can't do this in a 650. So if you had the money to spare, go straight to the 1050. They're good monthly payment options for 1050 that Dillon provides. So go to dillonprecision.com to find out more about the payment options, but only for the 1050. And Dillon is great. You have lifetime warranty. Their warranty process is amazing. Any issues with this press, you tell them, they'll send you stuff out, send replacement parts most of the time for free. And also it has a very high resale value. You can always sell your press. If you, like for me, to sell at 550, it was just a matter of days. I think 2 days, and somebody wanted to buy a 550. And I wanted to buy a 650. Within a day or two, I found somebody selling a 650. It's like buying a Glock, right? You can get lots of accessories, lots of parts, and a lot of people want to use the same thing. So Dillon is a great way to go if you want to load pistol or rifle rounds. So that's my update. Thanks for tuning in, and as always, hit subscribe to see more videos. I try and record more videos. I'm going to do a lot more shooting. What's going to be interesting is I'm in the northwest. It's starting to rain again. Rain is back after 3 months of dry season, and you're going to see me shooting in the rain, which is going to be interesting. So thank you very much. See ya.